Hi everybody and welcome back to B2BNAV. This week we are going to be discussing the topic of rebranding as a general topic. So it's something we've recently been through here at BDB, refreshing our own brand. And you'll notice we have an extra special guest with us on the podcast this week in the form of Sam. So you'll have heard me shouting, Sam, how long have we got left? And Sam, what's going on? And that kind of thing during these podcasts. Sam's one of the younger guys in our team and also heads up the 99p Gen Z podcast that we put out from the younger guys in our team to give a different perspective on issues like this. So Sam is a budding creative, so we thought we would bring him into the mix here to kind of have a chat with us. So hi Sam, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No worries.
It's an honour.
Do you want to kick us off, John, in the sense of, I guess, during this period of downtime at the minute, if we can call it that, or a period of people working from home with a bit more time on their hands, I think we're seeing more and more clients turn to looking at brand and maybe reactivating projects they've had on hold for a while.
Yeah.
What do you think's the root cause of that, I guess, in terms of branding being quite at the forefront for the meantime?
Yeah, it tends to boil down to probably a few specific things as to why people feel the need to do it. I think you're right. Time on your hands and kind of looking for things to do at this point in the world is probably a very high on that list. But you tend to find it's things like internationalization, when people want to kind of create a consistent image across multiple markets.
Yeah.
Good example of that, and apologies, Sam, you're not going to get this cultural reference, but Opal Fruits.
Oh, yeah. Starburst.
So,
yeah.
Back in the day...
I'll nod.
Starburst to you. But, they went through a process of internationalization, so they wanted to kind of cut, having multiple brands in multiple territories.
Mm-hmm.
Same with Snickers. So, what was that called previously in the UK?
Marathon.
Oh, nice.
Oh, hello.
Good knowledge.
Again, it's another example of it. Or Sif, which used to be called Jif.
Yeah.
And what they've done is they thought, right, if we rationalise our brand, what we can do, or rationalise the articulation of it, what we can do is create economies of scale with the marketing. That what theoretically one marketing program can then work globally.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's one thing.
Yeah.
Repositioning. So I guess in our world, and jump in here, Matt, if you at any point, but I think our journey as BDB has been, and it's an ongoing one, so it's not kind of like we're there yet, we're not the finished article, but we've kind of gone from being a very well-regarded international PR agency, and we're kind of taking ourselves on this journey to reflect, I guess, the nature of what we do as a business now, which is much more consultative, much more kind of partnering with clients at the beginning of the journey, the Marcoms journey. And our brand is now moving away from what I would call a traditional agency brand, more towards, and very consciously towards the McKinseys, the Accentures, the Cagency look and feel.
Yeah, very much so.
And we've kind of built that into kind of the long, short, medium, long-term journey of the business, that there would be these stages where we'd go through kind of a brand evolution. So I think it's
exactly that, John. I think it's exactly that in the sense of it is a journey, and I think it's constantly a moving feast. I think is the other thing, that you can't afford to let your brand stand still. And I think also linked to where you want to be from a proposition perspective and an externally client or customer facing perspective, equally internal branding and the employer brand probably has also not forced, but also led BDB to adapt our own brand and our own positioning and look and feel. And that's to cater for individuals like Sam, I guess, who are in the team. Whereas, how do you feel about that, Sam, from an employer branding perspective? Is that something you're consciously aware of these days when looking at a company to potentially join or work for or with?
Yeah, I think it's huge for me looking at sort of the content they're putting out. You get a look and feel for it, and I think with us sort of changing brand while I've been here, I think that the people we've brought on board, we've become we're even more sort of diverse, and we've got a lot of skill sets. So I think the branding now reflects that a bit more, and it has this sort of more it feels like a collective almost. and we bring all these skill sets together. And I think you could sort of see that from before I joined and I looked at BDB, and you start to see, there's quite a lot going on here, and you start to see the different elements of what makes BDB. And now I think we've brought that together quite nicely with the sort of images and the brand we've put forward.
Yeah. Okay. And then Ollie, I guess from your perspective, obviously we've just been through the Rebrand R&D here, and one of the flagship pieces, I guess, to that puzzle is the website, which I know you probably smirk at. It's been painful, but we got there in the end. And I think it's interesting, I suppose, from a client perspective, when they tackle a website project, it's challenging, and internally doing our own is equally challenging with stakeholder management and also content population, I guess, is the other thing as well. But what other aspects of a rebrand or a refresh from a digital and tech standpoint, I guess, are important to weave into those considerations alongside website, I guess, is one of the critical ones. But
well, you obviously got things like all your social platforms, all the different various places where your company really does live and breathe these days online. But it obviously goes wider than that too. People, you can't control what everybody's done, but people will have been using your logo for one reason or another for years. So within reason, you're going to want to try and get some of those things updated too. So if you've got a listing on an industry relevant website, for example, or a trade publication, you're going to want those updated. You obviously can't control what somebody went and posted on Twitter about you 2 years ago and things like that.
Sure.
So there is an awful lot of places that you probably haven't considered where your presence is felt online, and your brand does need to be kept up to date.
Yeah. Okay. And in terms of the website process itself, obviously we went through the kind of refresh kind of site mapping and UX and that side of things alongside the brand. Do they live and breathe in the same environment? Does the brand and kind of the user experience sit together, or do you, from a digital standpoint, see that as brands kind of sorted, look, feel, and then user experience is kind of separate? Or
yeah, I think it's almost, and we could have John's input here in a minute as well, but it's almost like the website takes some guidance or a lot of guidance from the brand, but it needs to be able to flex because the requirements of your website are quite different to the requirements of brand guidelines. Like brand guidelines are often quite fixed, and it'll say things like Word documents need to have these kind of headers, PowerPoint documents need to have these kind of headers. And then you start thinking, well, if that's what a header looks like, and that's what a welcome looks like, that's how it translates to online. And that often doesn't really work, because we're now in a different environment where people's expectations of your website are more influenced by their expectations and what they've seen on other websites, as opposed to your brand guidelines. So it's basically trying to mold those slightly and flex the brand guidelines slightly, so it still feels very much in line with your brand, but you're not having to damage your user experience because you're limited to what's in the brand guidelines.
Yeah, I think you're right there, Ollie. I mean, you used the right word there. Like, I always refer people back to the fact that they're called brand guidelines,
I've heard you say
not
that.
brand rules. And you'll all have heard me say that to people and clients and the like. And I think when we did our process, we kind of took all the learnings from every experience and every rebrand we've done with a client organisation. And I certainly went through it in my head of thinking, well, actually, how would I want this to be from an ideal perspective? Almost like a use case, so we know, what's worked and what hasn't, and really play it through. Yeah. And I mean, we started the journey on the rebrand, months and months and months ago, and I think it was around discussing the brand values and our mission statement. Yeah, and that's what started it. So actually, we kind of got a feeling of what we stand for. Yeah, what our why is. What our brand values are, what the personality of our brand is, before we even put pen to paper. I think, in fact, probably the last thing that we did was look at, well, what's the logo look like? And interestingly, our logo is a clear playback to the kind of the 4 pillars of the business and the 4 brand values that we've got, and them coming together. And as Sam said, it's an amalgamation of different skill sets, different people, different kind of ideas, different working practices that makes it so the logo reflects the essence of what we've got at BDB. Yeah, and it wasn't like the first part of the journey was, hey, Matt, we've got a new logo. What do you think? Isn't that great? Yeah. It was like, we've done all this hard work, and actually, the thing that got said was, actually, look at the logo. our previous logo does not reflect anything about the business that we are today. In fact, the previous logo has been with the business since 1987.
Yeah.
Bar one little change that we made in 2016, 17?
Drop in the red.
Where we dropped the red out of it. And so how could that logo possibly reflect a business that works in an industry that changes year on year, month on month in terms of what's kind of important, how people work, process, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So we did all that. And then I think the website becomes its own project within that. So back to the original point of them being guidelines, we were very clear that our brand is organic enough to be able to work in different ways in different environments. So while our PowerPoints and our Word documents look very similar, they are different, and they're different because they're different media.
Yeah.
Equally, the website is different, but it's familial.
I think the beauty for me is now it finally all hangs together. And that's what, I know it's been a journey and it's just me being impatient, but in the sense of it's...
You impatient?
Well, I take that on the chin. But in the sense of it's more of a finally it feels like everything hangs together is what I mean. So it feels and looks like it's part of the same family. Yeah. And I feel from a customer centricity point of view and employee centricity, like the likes of Sam on the team, of you want it to feel consistent, like it's not an afterthought.
No, it fits. Everything fits and does what it needs to do at the point it needs to do it.
And I guess from your perspective, Sam, because I guess from the like brand guidelines there were obviously referenced at various junctures in the conversation there, but I kind of view you as a little internal creative at our place, I guess. So like almost like an in-house person would be a client. How important to you are brand guidelines when you're given a project? So somebody says, can you do a video for us? Can you do this social media post for us? Whatever. Is it instinctively, do you want to run off in your own direction, or are brand guidelines helpful for somebody like yourself?
I think I liked what John said when he said they're guidelines, not rules, because I think you need to look at those guidelines and interpret something. And it's really difficult to do, to look at something and say, I'm going to do it the way they want it, but with my sort of spin on it. And you have to be careful about how much you spin it, because you don't want it to lose direction.
Yeah.
But they're really, they're a guide to guide that process, and they almost skip a step of communication, where instead of me having to sit down with John or whoever's providing the guidelines and say, how should this look? And, does this look right? You can say, well, here's a, baseline, and then you can develop from that further and maybe push your look a little bit.
Yeah.
But yes, I think they're really helpful. I think they're needed really for anything, just to have the coverage and that baseline. It's almost a template to build off of.
And in terms of, I don't know, my personal experience with clients and internally for ourselves is, and I think I've referenced it previously on the podcast, is everything feels out of sync at various points. So most companies we work with have a set of brand guidelines that were done at some point in their history. I suppose is the easiest catch-all way to summarize that. But then they've got PowerPoints that have gone off in a direction, people creating their own Word documents. They've got values and missions that maybe have been updated and mishmashed over the years or changed, and so on. Logos may have been tweaked for things like anniversaries or different evolutions. New businesses coming on board through M&As and that kind of thing. At what point do you say, John, I guess, right, we've got to draw the line in the sand here and attack it from the, I say, bottom up, or is that impossible?
Nothing's impossible, but it can be incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
And I think bottom up it's always going to be a struggle. And I think particularly if you're dealing with larger organizations with multiple offices, multiple territories, multiple kind of sectors that they serve, whatever it might be. If you start in a bottom up perspective, you're always starting from a single point that's got to then radiate back out. Whereas if you go top down, kind of take a much more holistic approach to it and deliver something that you can then adapt across those segments. So rather than the tail wagging the dog, you can start to kind of affect things and filter it through in a more controlled way.
Yeah.
Because what you find, bottom up, what you find is one small thing will be absolutely resolved beautifully and elegantly and work perfectly. and then it'll be thrown into the kind of the real world, and it won't be appropriate for another part of the business, or it just won't resonate or something like that. So it's always got to be really top down, and that goes for the CEO, the managing director, the board, whoever it is. I mean, that takes me to probably the next point actually in why people rebrand, and that's because a new CEO comes in. Which sounds really weird, but it's like, I bought a green company. I don't like green companies. I want a blue company. Let's rebrand to a blue
people
company.
Are always keen to put their own stamp on it, without doubt, aren't they? I guess, and that's one of the things. I think even see it with CMOs, don't you? And CEOs, one of the two roles when people join, typically they're not satisfied with it and want to be seen to add value or seen to drive the brand
So
forward.
There'll always be a repitch. There'll always be a beauty parade. I hate that phrase, but it's that, where I'm going to bring the agencies in and I'm going to have a look and I'm going to be the big I am around it.
Yeah, yeah.
And you've got to kind of be really careful at that point that it isn't just becoming a vanity project for an individual. You've still got to be back in those business objectives as to why you'd rebrand. Rebranding is not an aesthetic exercise. It's a business it's a business opportunity, but you've got to know why you're doing it.
Yeah. And I guess setting the tone at the top, Ollie, equally filters through to kind of your online presence or digital presence. So like we referenced the website earlier, how important do you see that for a central function to control that brand from a digital standpoint as well? Because I'm thinking of clients that we work with here where they've got, they operate in 50 plus countries, 10, 15, 20 very disparate business groups and so on. And everybody wants to go off and do their own thing. Whether that's site pages, social media handles, you name it.
Yeah.
Again,
I think we might have touched on this on a previous podcast in some capacity, but possibly with regards to social guidelines and things like that as well, because it very much applies, and it's particularly hard for some of our larger clients. And I guess it really depends on the nature of your setup, the nature of your teams, how much independency you want them to have from a central team. I think it is important to have somebody that has sight of everything that's going on, as well as that set of rules that people can follow, so that you can start to dial things back if people have gone too far. Because I think we do see quite often that does happen. It's often like a salesperson has decided to throw together a different look and feel of image, and they put that on their social in line with brand guidelines, or in some cases government regulation. I think it is important to have guidelines and processes in place, and ideally have some level of central control. But realistically, with some of the type of companies we're talking about, you just don't have the manpower in a central team to manage everyone. So I think it's more that touching in, keeping an eye on things, rather than needing to sign off everything that every region, every team produces.
Okay.
But, that takes a brave business as well, doesn't it? I mean, I know certainly when we've had opportunities or we've met with clients or we've kind of discussed things with them, it can be equally terrifying to hear the word centralized marketing team as it can to hear decentralized marketing team.
Yeah. Very much
dependent on how iron the rod is that's kind of guarding the ship. And it can be, centralized marketing can be amazing, as can decentralized marketing. I think the problem is with a lot of larger organizations, it kind of pivots too far one way or the other, and they don't understand that they can work together. So actually the centralized team should sit there as a kind of a guide or a sage or some sort of I don't know, Yoda-like figure who can kind of opine wisdom, and then the other guys can go out and do it and feel empowered and enabled to do it.
An important point here as well is that the central team won't have visibility in most cases of every different use case and every different scenario that the regional team will be facing. So if you try and lock things down too much, it'll be like, here's your template that you must always use. And then you'll get the regional team looking at it and go, well, this just doesn't work for how we're doing things a lot of the time. That's important to have that.
That's where the guidance comes in, and that idea of giving people not enough rope to hang themselves with, but giving people that flexibility that Sam mentioned, that, okay, here is a set of design principles. that we would like you to use within every piece of collateral that you deliver. You know, we're all adults. We should all be able to then work within that, and kind of, as long as you apply these principles, you can develop whatever you need, whether it's a 30-page A5 PDF or a set of banners for an exhibition.
I think at least it gives you the ability to act as the brand police and pull people back in, doesn't it? To say that is not in line with our brand guidelines, because I know I've seen clients struggle with that, where they're perhaps taking a slightly looser approach to brand guidelines as an afterthought, and therefore they're constantly fighting that battle of, well, that isn't right, and then somebody will say, well, tell me what is right then, because at no point have you actually informed me what's right. And, you know, we've got that internally at our place, haven't we, as the brand guidelines have evolved over time, and even presentation guidelines versus brand guidelines versus
it's finding that's water's edge, isn't it, for your business, because every business is different, and every business operates in a different way and has different struggles and troubles along the way, but each one has its own little meter and its own like heartbeat of how far and how intelligent people are in the application of those guidelines. You know,
absolutely.
We see it a lot. You know, sometimes there's a need for benign dictatorship, and sometimes there is that need allowance of flexibility.
100%. I guess, Sam, while we've got you with us, you might become a regular spot, who knows? But while we've got you on this week, one of the things I wanted to touch on with you, particularly around kind of brand, and then maybe going slightly out here, but it's relevant for a lot of client projects at the minute when we're looking at employee or employee value propositions, in terms of, I guess, piecing together, there's the brand element of it, then you've kind of got what sits behind that being values and mission statements, I guess, in terms of the inspirational side of what employers try to do. And I guess I can only speak on behalf of myself here. In my generation, I consider myself the generation where values and mission statement weren't quite as important. And I can only speak about myself here. Can't speak about every colleague I've ever worked with, but I think we were the generation who just got the head down, did 80-hour weeks, slogged it out as hard as you could to earn as much as you could, and get bonused as heavy as you could through all that hard work. Whereas certainly the media would have you believe, and listening to your podcast and speaking to the younger guys in our team, and it came up on a call earlier with a client, this assumption that Gen Zs are more interested in having a corporately responsible and socially aware company, you know, backed up by strong visions and values and mission statements, than certain other elements like reward and benefit and all the other stuff that it may be. How true is that? How important to you, when you're thinking about working for somebody, are the values and the mission statement, I guess, is the question.
I think they're important enough that you have to sort of buy into them. Because I think now you have brands and companies almost have a sort of personality to them, and when you say the values, a lot of our values are reflective of the values of a person. You know, so I could share values with BDB quite easily, and so I think you have to like that person that the brand is, and you have to buy into it and say, if I'm going to work at this company, I can reflect the personality of the company. So I think for me, it's quite important that if you're going into a company and they're putting forward something that you can't reflect yourself, I don't think that company is probably right for you.
Would you consciously go as far to, you know, you're looking for a job, you've been invited for an interview, would you be looking at values and mission statement as your research? Is that something you do, or are you more bothered about base salary and opportunity and growth? I don't know, or I don't know. It's a genuine debate I keep having with myself all the time.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and I think a lot of it, it's quite weird, because when you have things like base salary opportunities, it's not only sort of, you know, numbers on a page, word on a page. I think values is better reflected by the people in the company. If I sit and read a sheet that says this is our values, okay, someone's like, you know, wrote them down, but do they truly believe them? Whereas if you see someone like yourself, or I mean, everyone in this call is a sort of business leading people, if you reflect those values as part of you and you communicate professionally, then to me, I'll buy into that a lot easier. You know, if you're, so, you know, at BDB, we have we embrace challenges. So if you as a business leader is embracing those challenges and tackling them head on, I'm quite likely to go, oh, okay, you know, I buy onto this, I like this. Whereas if it's just written down, you sort of think, you know, do they, or
and how would you qualify that prior to working somewhere? Is that where the social media presence comes in, Ollie? Is that where you think there's an opportunity there, or?
I think so. I think that's the way we see a lot of people using social media. Certain platforms anyway, LinkedIn, Instagram, often end up being one of the places that you can really kind of endorse the company and what it's like to work at that company, and you can see a little bit of what's going on behind the scenes in those platforms as well. Sometimes you'll see some of that presence on the website, but I think a little bit like Sam says, I suppose the website's a bit more like seeing it written down, and social media is a bit closer to seeing somebody kind of living and breathing it, I suppose.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Is there anything else anybody else wants to add on this? Because I guess we've strayed away from branding like we tend to, but it kind of does touch so many other areas of a business and a plan and the kind of corporate footprint. So anything else to add, John, given it's your baby, this area?
I mean, you know, it's interesting what Sam says. And I think it's probably, if we're going to do like key takeaways, what Sam said about believing in the top of the tree, believing in it. That's kind of the best bit of advice in terms of, you asked earlier, bottom up, top down for rebrand. How can you possibly believe in a rebrand if it's 4 or 5 management layers away from the leaders of the business?
I think the challenge there, my personal experience and challenge, is making sure the values and the mission statement are like an acknowledgement of the leader's personality, but isn't the leader's personality.
Yeah,
if that makes sense. And I think that's a tough balance to get through, because not everybody's the same in the business. You want to promote diversity. Everybody will have different.
And that's why I think when we did our values, I can recognise elements of you, elements of me, elements of Ollie, elements of people, lots of people throughout the business.
Yeah.
But it's almost like some of the values are much more, you know, I look at it and go, that's a Matt value.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And it's kind of.
But I wouldn't overlook that with you in terms of the time and effort we spent on our own values. Whereas probably earlier on in my career, I guess, is when I look back on things, when I worked for companies, I didn't believe in the values. They were just things written down on a piece of paper or something they had on a plaque on the wall. And I suppose Sam's point, echoing back to that, really, maybe why I switched off to values and mission statements is because I never worked anywhere where I felt truly
didn't feel part of that value.
Embraced them. Yeah.
That's it, isn't it? And you think, you know, it's no mistake or accident that ours took the best part of 6 months to absolutely hone in.
Yeah, but I think it's an example when you say, like, you know, one of ours is we refuse to stand still. And I think one of the places I worked at previously had a very similar essence of what they were trying to say anyway. But then they did everything exactly the same, how they'd always done it. And you sit there going, you can't put that on the wall and then hark back to the archaic ways of professional services in that sense. So I think there's a lot of truth.
It's the same with agencies. You know, I will, you know, for every agency that's got a unique and set of values that reflect them individually, you'll have 5 agencies that say they're passionate and creative. Guarantee you'll see it there. We are passionate, right? Yeah, that's a given. We are creative. Well, that's like back to the story, you know, an accountant who's good with numbers. It's kind of part of the job description.
Well, I think we find ourselves saying a lot. It's just table stakes, isn't it? And I know that's something, probably one of the phrases I've used that many times in that many different meetings with clients now, when they say this makes us different, and you go, no,
it doesn't. It absolutely doesn't. Yeah,
it really doesn't. And sometimes it's the combination of a few things, I do think, when you put them together. But okay, cool. I think that's been really interesting, and thanks for giving us a different perspective, Sam. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
No problem. In terms of checking us out, feel free to find us and follow us on www.b2BKnowledge.com, our ungated content hub, helping our clients, prospects, and contacts navigate the ever-evolving B2B marketing landscape. And we'll be back next week. We are purposely trying to steer clear of COVID-related topics, albeit I have a funny feeling marketing through or during a recession may be one that we pick up in due course, having seen what could be on the horizon. So that could be an interesting one as well. So stay tuned, and we'll see you all soon. Thanks a lot.
Goodbye.
Bye. Bye.